Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to this session. My name is Karen Steele. I'm with VMware. I'm very pleased to be here today to introduce our marketing partner and independent publisher, TechTarget. We have a fantastic session for you today. You're going to hear a lot of really great independent content and research that's come out of a recent survey that they've done with their buyers. If you're not familiar with TechTarget, they have more than 100 tech websites and more than 11 million tech buyers. So they have a great base of knowledge, and they're going to impart some of that wisdom on you here today. So it's my pleasure to introduce Rebecca Kitchens, Senior Vice President Group Publisher, and Jon Brown, Publisher. Thank you again for coming.
Great, thank you, Karen. And thank you, everyone, for joining us. As Karen mentioned, TechTarget is an independent media company, and we spend a lot of time surveying and researching, what we're all doing here. How is the state of computing continuing to evolve, and how can we, as practitioners, as marketers, as users, continue to improve the work that we do in our computing environment. So as we've spent a lot of time looking at all this data and found a lot of benefit that have come for it, in the amount of content that we're putting out and the type of content we're putting out, we thought it'd be super valuable for folks like yourself attending VMworld for the week to get some insight on either what your peers may be doing if you are a user, or from a vendor side, how the users are looking at technology, what are they looking at purchasing, and what are the reasons behind their pain points. That's going to help you better position your content and your products and solutions. So we're going to dive right in, and Jon Brown's going to take you through that session. But before we get into that, I just wanted to give you a little bit of background on the type of information you're going to hear today and who it's coming from. As Karen mentioned, we do operate a large number of independent technology websites. And you can see here the type of content we're putting out is very specific and very deep dive, and the goal of that content is to help users solve problems. So our number one priority is when someone's out there doing a Google research, looking at, how do I migrate my VMs, or what's the best backup solution, for a cloud environment. We want to be that destination website that they go to continue their research process. So you can see the type of content that we're putting out. It's very problem-solving oriented content that's going to help users as you're making purchase decisions. We have a really strong depth and history focusing on the VMware ecosystem. There are 15 dedicated editors that are employed by TechTarget. Their full-time job is making sure they're covering the VMware ecosystem. We also operate the industry-leading VDI and enterprise mobility management site and independent conference. We get about 400,000 visitors a month of people that are coming to our content to research server virtualization. And even more than that are coming to research virtual desktop and mobility technologies. We're writing a lot of this content. We spend a lot of time living and breathing this information. And I think that's why it's been such a great partnership with VMworld, is they chose us about 7 years ago to be the partner who executed their Best of Show awards. We awarded that yesterday. Eaton actually got top honors as Best in Show for their revolutionary way of actually virtualizing power consumption. A huge pain point that everybody has, and no vendor had really thought about how to execute it that way. So we awarded them the top honors. That's an independent award that we give out. We manage the submissions, we manage all of the consideration of the vendors, and award it to some of the vendors in this on the show floor today. We obviously cover the VMware ecosystem very well, but it's not just about the VMware ecosystem. We do have coverage across all areas of IT. And at this point, we're about 140 websites strong. We also operate about 60 websites outside of the US in various foreign languages. So in all, we reach, as Karen said, about 11 million members. We do a lot of CIO interviews. We are looking at always attracting new members to our communities. It is free for users to come into our sites and get information. And in turn, we actually work with vendors and technology providers to help provide a way to educate users on their solutions and provide really strong marketing vehicles to help them grow their business. And again, to keep in the back of your mind, the type of users that you're going to see information for, we reach 97% of the Fortune 1000. We have people like the CIO of Best Buy or the head of technology at Pepsi are members of our community and researching every day. So with that as a background, what you're going to hear today is kind of excerpts of different surveys that we do across the year. We have something called purchase intentions, like what do you plan on buying? Why are you buying it? What are your pain points you're trying to solve? And then also we do pulse surveys, like if we really feel that there's some trend that's out there that's catching a lot of attention and we need to kind of figure it out so we can make sure we're writing content that's most valuable to users, we survey our audience. So we're going to share some of these excerpts. We also have some market perspectives. You know, truthfully, again, we cover this space a lot. So John's going to share with you some, opinions from TechTarget on where the market's going and where either users might want to look at it in terms of their own infrastructure and where vendors might be able to get some wins in the space. We're also going to share some top research content. What is the content on our network that's getting the most attention from users? Both on the editorial side, but also vendor content. We operate the largest vendor library for technology products on the web. We have about 3,000 different pieces of content at any given time. And our goal for today is really twofold. The first is, help users benchmark their infrastructure compared to their peers. You might be out there looking to roll out a big project. Well, how have you done this? Or what should you be looking for when you're trying to roll this out? And then also for vendors, how can you make sure that you're developing the strongest content, positioning your products in a way that's actually going to be valuable to users to help them solve their problems long term. So for example, if anyone here is from the vendor community, we have this great content development guide that actually goes into in-depth recommendations on if you are going to market topics like cloud or virtualization or security or disaster recovery, ways that you might want to best position your technologies and services. So with that as a background, I am going to turn this over to Jon Brown. And just give us a minute for a mic change.
Small little technical transition. All right, well, good afternoon, everybody. Hope you enjoyed your lunch. I certainly enjoyed mine. I have the unenviable position of being the first guy to talk after lunch. And also, I think this is the last session in this room, so here we go. So we do, like Rebecca said, we do a ton of surveys. One we do every year is to just take the pulse of all IT. Just understand what projects are out there across the globe, which are the most funded, which are the most urgent, and then we rank them all. And we actually ask about 80 different technology initiatives. And for 2013, this is sort of the list of the top 22 IT projects that are out there on Earth that are funded. Number one is data protection, very widespread, getting a lot of visibility. But number two is server virtualization. Server virtualization is the number 2 project on Earth when it comes to funding, when it comes to driving IT spend, when it comes to keeping IT managers up at night and being concerned about that. We bring that up because certainly in the vendor community there can be fatigue about virtualization, not so much in the user space, but even here at this show, you see a lot of talk around cloud, and what our audience tells us is cloud is very important, and we are headed in that direction, but right now we're doubling down on server virtualization. You can see some of the other priorities that are out there as well. Disaster recovery, business continuity, big data and business analytics and that sort of stuff. But it's always interesting to watch and see what changes. Last year, Windows 7 migration was the #1 topic. This year, number 17. People, they've planned it. It's well on the way, and off it goes. So I do like to put that out as a backdrop. You can also start to see that mobility and tablet PCs, a lot of the topics that are in this sort of top 20 list are really around supporting mobility and mobile device management and what have you. So I like to put that out as a backdrop. Now, one of the things we did is we did a very extensive study of CIOs, and we literally went out and interviewed 200 CIOs and VPs of IT who are the top decision makers in the organization to just understand, if you look back 3 years, what is the best, most significant thing that you've done as a CIO? What was it? And the number one win for senior IT has been virtualizing their server infrastructure. It was a hands-down win. They all looked good. They all saved a lot of money. They were modernizing their infrastructures. And we see some other things there, network infrastructure there. We're starting to see public cloud come in. And some, about 20, 25% are saying, hey, we built a private cloud. But hands down, virtualization has been the biggest win that senior IT has seen. When we look and ask them about cloud, and really start to understand, okay, well, where are you with cloud, and what is that, when it comes to impacting your infrastructure? How do you think about cloud? And the number one way to think about cloud that senior IT thinks about it is, hey, I'm a pragmatist. I'm going to look at cloud for just about everything that we do, and I'm going to employ it where it makes sense, and I'm going to avoid it where the technology isn't there. There are very few senior IT folks who are not bullish on cloud. Only 4% actually said, oh, cloud, that's my last resort. The other 96% were like, hey, you know what, we're doing it, or it hasn't hit us yet, but I'm not avoiding it. There's a real rift here between senior IT and sort of rank and file IT. Senior IT, very bullish on cloud. Rank and file IT, a little more nuanced, a little bit more, well, this is going to be really significant changes to what we do, so a little bit less enthusiastic. So if you're a vendor, just keep that in mind, that your CIO messaging is going to work very well, bullish on cloud, but you're really going to have to talk much more about that transition if you're talking to people who are typically in a silo, especially as you're talking about software-defined data center. Really like, well, if you're the network guy, how is that going to impact you? And it's important to tease that out and to explain it. We also like to understand, there's a lot of talk around shadow IT. And hey, there's this sense that there might be, rogue IT units that are out there that are using cloud without our involvement. And what we found is that, yeah, shadow IT certainly exists, but 2/3 of the senior IT folks go, even on those shadow projects, central IT's got a finger in it, and we're keeping our pulse on it. I don't know if they're delusional or not, whether they think they've got it under control more than they do, but 2/3 of them are saying, yeah, it exists, and we're on top of it, and we're managing it, and it's part of the fabric of life that we're going forward with. Looking forward and just trying to understand, okay, you're a CIO, what are your top investment priorities going forward? The number one investment priority if you're a CIO is handling risk management, understanding security and compliance. A lot of that has to do with your security and compliance model being broken by BYOD, by these new devices that are coming in and connecting to your network. But we see that still the number 2 investment priority is virtualizing and consolidating servers, then looking at the network, data analytics and big data being a factor there. And number 7, and this was number 7 out of 7. And I don't want to burst anyone's balloon, or a lot of us are cloud, cloud, cloud. But when we talk to senior IT folks about the reality of what they're investing in today, cloud is actually the 7th out of 7. It's not to say that they're not investing in it, but in terms of priority, risk management, some of these more concrete enhancing the network are still more center of the plate than building a cloud. Now recognize, this is aggregate across the market. You certainly got CIOs who are cloud, 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 cloud. But when we look at them in aggregate, it's on the radar, they're investing in it, but it is not yet what I consider a top 3 priority, which means it's something that they're laying awake at night trying to figure out how they're going to do it, or how they're going to talk to the board about how they're going to do it. Another area we looked at with the senior IT folks is saying, hey, there's device proliferation, which was a nice way of saying people bring in their own stuff, people using and connecting 2 and 3 devices to your network. How is that actually affecting your infrastructure? And we do this for a bunch of reasons. One is we publish this magazine, it's called Modern Infrastructure, so we're very concerned about what infrastructures are changing and what is driving them. The number one thing that device proliferation has caused to change is it broke our security model, and we had to fix it. We used to have this wonderful perimeter, and it was lovely, and the desktops were within it, and we had a firewall, and the bad guys were over here, and the good guys were over here. As soon as we got a groundswell of mobile devices that were not BlackBerries, that were not managed by a BES, we suddenly had a million holes, a million security holes, a million ways for data to come into and out of the organization. And there's been a real sort of sense of urgency that, okay, we've got to address this. And so that has changed, and a lot of security models had to change. Some folks went to what was called micro-perimeterization, going down to an application level. Other people are trying to figure it out, and our sense is that 2/3 of the market still hasn't figured out exactly how to solve this problem, but it is absolutely a top of mind. Those that have figured it out implemented mobile device management software. About 1/3 of the market has implemented MDM. The other 2/3 have not. Still the Wild West out there. There is still a lot of growth when it comes to managing those devices that each of you are handing in your hands, collecting corporate data right now, not on the corporate network. And then there's changes to business applications. About 25%, largely large organizations, are saying, hey, we've got to rewrite our applications so that they work on these new devices across multiple platforms, and that is a very big endeavor that's going on. And then network upgrades. And then the last one, we call this bring your own disaster, changing your backup and DR strategy to deal with these mobile devices and endpoint perfusion. Very few organizations have actually good, concrete ways of managing the data and the information that's on these devices, and even fewer of them are doing backups. And to us, as we look at it, we say this is an area of growth. We are just waiting for that huge breach when that guy from the credit reporting agency leaves his phone in the cab and somebody finds it and publishes it. We would never do that, of course, but we expect there's going to be some disasters in this area, and suddenly this is going to be a very high priority for folks. So looking at what we found from senior IT, and if you're a marketer, I wrote some bullets like, hey, if you're trying to market to senior IT, but if you're in senior IT, you can nod your head like, yeah, that makes sense, or no, it doesn't. The first is this: virtualization is the biggest of big wins for senior IT. And what that says is, if you're coming in on a virtualization message, it's a good thing. It is positive. That is positively viewed. If you're helping with virtualization, you're a good guy. If you're not helping with virtualization, you're not such a good guy. Shadow IT exists. And we believe it still does remain in the shadow. CIOs believe they have their hands on it, but our sense is some do, some don't. And then senior IT is very pragmatic in their approach. They are very realistic about it. They are not jumping into the mainstream. We're not seeing CIOs going, that's it, we're getting rid of our data centers, or even CIOs saying, we're taking all 29 of our data centers and turning it into one huge, totally mobile cloud that's able to swap workloads all over the place. We are still seeing much more pragmatic approaches, much more incremental approaches, and we think that makes sense. And we think as a trend, we're looking at a 12, 13, 15-year trend as opposed to a 5-year trend like what we're seeing in mobile device management. As far as market stages, we separate the world into 4 market stages, sort of very early when we're just talking about things, early maturity, late maturity, and then death. We actually put virtualization as mature, and what this means is that the content and the stuff that people are reading around virtualization is much more around decision stage content. That is, you don't have to explain to them what virtualization is, but you do need to explain the differences between what this product does in virtualization versus another, and that is where the market is, and that is the content that resonates. And then for cloud computing, we put that at a much earlier stage. We are out of hype. We watched hype. We saw, there was a time when you could just see the Google Trends page views for cloud going crazy, and everybody, you could go to cocktail parties and people were, oh, cloud, yeah, we should do that. That has largely subsided. Also, cloud computing has divided into about 18, 19 different categories, and we continue to see that divide going on. That is what is actually going to help the market move forward and come up with solutions that people can actually buy and implement and use, as opposed to just be like, oh, this cloud thing, it's going to be really cool. So that's what we're seeing there. So this next step is I'm going to do a little bit of a deep dive on the research on virtualization and virtualization adoption, and it is my sincerest hope that I can keep you all awake in the post-lunch period as we go through this data. a little bit about TechTarget. Rebecca talked about it, but we go crazy on virtualization. I mean, TechTarget, we have 5 sites that are almost 100% dedicated to virtualization. With Brian Madden, Search VMware, Search Virtual Desktop, Search Server Virtualization. We spend so much. First of all, how many of you, have any of you been to any of these sites? Search VMware, Search Server Virtualization. Thank you. Please keep coming, come back often, and read a long time. We spend a tremendous amount of our effort producing content for our virtualization audience, which at this point is over 1.1 million unique readers who come back. We put out 3,500 articles, 10 articles a day on virtualization across our network to make sure that we're covering this as much as possible. And our contributors, we've got about 15 editors and another 70 contributors. Everybody we know who has a good opinion, that knows what they're talking about, we try to get them to write for us and really go as deep as possible on things that are of interest to our audience. So, when we look at the market opportunity for virtualization, again, this is for marketers, what's out there? Server virtualization is way more popular than cloud, it's way more popular than big data, and it's way more popular than mobility. So keeping that in perspective in terms of what people actually want, server virtualization comes out number 1. We are seeing server virtualization use cases being very important. So originally it was like, hey, we just want to consolidate. That's it. I want to take 10 workloads and put it on one physical machine. Big win. Off we go. We are now seeing people go, no, I'm looking at server virtualization for disaster recovery, and we especially see that in small and medium businesses. And we are seeing server virtualization driving investment as a road to the cloud. VMware gave up on the journey to the cloud message. It's finally resonating. So we see this all the time, that the message that VMware was putting out 2 years ago about virtualization being your direction to cloud is actually what we are seeing happen now, about 24 months later. We are seeing virtualization management being a big issue. And so, you've gotten above 25 or 50% virtualization, suddenly it's like, ooh, I've got to manage this stuff. I've got sprawl. I've got workloads going all over the place. I've got capacity issues. I've got I/O bottlenecks and strong interest there. And then we are starting to see network and storage virtualization creeping in. So going in that same path where people are looking at network virtualization, they are buying and taking toe dips in storage virtualization, such that you can look and say, hey, that train has left the station. These are clearly going to be valid initiatives that are going on. Real, actual data. We ask about, and we do this census twice a year just to understand what platforms are you using. And this is one of those like, okay, tell me every virtualization platform that you're using. VMware ESX, clearly the winner. 22,000 people in this building, can't be wrong. That is an early winner, and the larger the organization, the more likely they are to be using the latest version of VMware. We see Citrix charting, and if you look down a little bit lower, you'll see Microsoft Hyper-V. 3 and 2 coming into the list. This is a North American skew in that VMware is the most strong in our surveys in North America. Not to say that they're the leader in every market, but there's nuance as to, well, who's doing what in which particular geography. When we look at primary virtualization, so this is, all right, let's step back. You told me that you use Xen and Microsoft and VMware. That's not true. Nobody's using all 3 of them. But which one is your primary? And here it's quite clear that in the high end of the market, VMware has a commanding about 70% of the market is using VMware. Latest version, have standardized on it. And we see that Microsoft is doing an okay job in the small and medium space with not the newest version of the product, but rather with the version 2.0 when we see what's going on there. But one of the things we are absolutely trying to understand is, hey, is there any groundswell? Are people switching? Is there any movement here? And if so, why is that? And so the vast majority, well more than half of the market is saying, we're not looking at any alternatives. You know what, VMware's fine. It's great, we love it. But those that are looking at alternatives, this is where it gets interesting, where Microsoft Hyper-V version 3 is getting some consideration. What is surprising to us and probably worth noting is that it's not just small and medium businesses who are looking there, but we're actually seeing large enterprises saying, you know what, we're going to take a look and see what Microsoft has. I would not call this a huge trend, and I certainly wouldn't call it a trend in North America. Outside of North America, there is a little bit more pressure on VMware, especially with regards to licensing. And the big driver here is that there's some license cost pressure, especially in Europe, where the world blew up with the economy, and they really haven't gotten out of it in the way that here in America, the recession's over, right? Everybody, we're all buying houses and cars again, right? It's over. But in Europe, they're still suffering quite a bit here, and we see that. When we look at how they're going to use that alternative to the product that they're using now, we see the normal progression. We always see this. Well, if you're looking at an alternative, the first thing you're going to do is throw it to the engineers and use it for test and dev. And if that works out, we'll take a couple of those workloads and provision up some production machines and see and go. So, that's it. Interesting one to watch here is they're looking at alternatives to what they have for desktop virtualization and for private cloud computing infrastructure. This one I think would be scary. And this is the one that, for VMware marketers in the room, I say, okay, let's pay attention to this and make sure that people aren't going, whoa, let's look at the Microsoft cloud. Let's give that a try. And there does appear to be a segment of the market, 20, 50, 1 out of 5, 1 out of 6 organizations that are saying, you know what, we're going to look at the Microsoft cloud options that are out there. So it's not, in any way a huge trend, but it's something to be aware of. And again, I talked about this, but the reason they're doing it largely is money. We do a census of how far along organizations are when it comes to virtualization. And so you can see that it's all over the place. That small businesses, a lot of them are still, about 35% are still going, hey, we're below 25% virtualized. What we're tracking here and what we're forecasting is that year over year, this year, there's going to be about a 16% growth in server virtualization adoption. That is to say 16% more physical machines are going to run server virtualization software next year than this year. So again, when we talk about that spending priority and how important this is, you're not seeing that kind of growth really in any other markets that are out there where 16% of the assets that are out there are going to get this new software applied. This is an incredibly strong growth that if you're looking for that growth in this chart, you can't see it. I'm just telling you. All right. We look at some of the ancillary areas for virtualization, and one of them is looking at sophistication and backup. And this is one of the areas where we're starting to see virtualization really drive changes to other infrastructure areas, and backup has been one of the big ones here. If we look at the VMs out in the world and what have you, that has really turned into quite a business. There's a bunch of reasons why you had to change your backup, which all of you know, so I won't get into it. But that has been a success story as well. And then lastly, just looking at what is driving server virtualization budgets. Number one answer really is modernizing our architecture. Again, we make this magazine. It's called Modern Infrastructure. It's all about this, about modernizing your infrastructure. Keeping up with business growth is another reason to drive that budget. Now, this is one that in North America looks relatively tame. When we ask this in Asia, off the charts. Business growth is the primary driver for budget increase and provisioning new applications in a way that here we're about saving money and incrementalism. We're seeing much more dramatic changes going on elsewhere. Wanting to save on hardware costs has always been interesting, but we are seeing now implementing private cloud computing. Here's a good example of, hey, our virtualization budget is increasing because of cloud computing. All right, they're having problems. Top problem is I/O bottlenecks, and this continues to be a problem. This is a management issue. maybe some vendors out here have tools that can help you all with this problem, but I/O bottlenecks have been a problem since the beginning of time when it comes to virtualization, because you're doing things with your network and with your storage that they maybe weren't designed to do or weren't aware that those types of workloads were coming to them, and it is still showing up as a big problem. And then we get performance issues. So application performance, server performance, those issues are driving it, and that largely is resulting in people looking at converged infrastructure. You know, you've got Cisco and HP and IBM and Dell out here talking about converged infrastructure, or whatever their particular acronym is that they use to describe converged infrastructure. But those performance issues are something that we're showing that is really benefiting those that are selling converged infrastructure, so that you can really identify where those problems are. And systems management challenges, the one that really jumps out here is that the mid-market still has a huge problem with backup. Large enterprises have solved it, small enterprises didn't really have a problem. That 100 to 1,000 space where you have sort of generalists and jacks of all trade, that one step of, well, we've got to back this up and turn it into something we can restore easily and protect that data. There's a huge blip there. There's a great market opportunity for someone in that space. Looking at content, so we're a publisher, we care a great deal about, well, what are people reading? How long are they spending with it? And this gives a lot of insight into where the market is right now. And so our top editorial pieces, this is interesting. The first is an IT handbook, which is a product that our editors put together, and it is Introduction to Virtualization, which really, you know, it seems surprising. Here we are, it's 2013, almost 2014, and Introduction to Virtualization is still a top performing piece of content. Here's what we're seeing. There are a lot of people who are getting drawn into virtualization, who are new to the industry or being reassigned, and they just don't know what to do, and they're working with peers who have been steeped in virtualization, and we get a lot of people looking for information about that. You know, e-guides, meshing virtual machines and physical systems management. This is, how do I manage all this stuff? I've got my physical systems, I've got my virtual systems. Can I manage that in a single pane of glass? A lot of people will tell you yes, but the jury remains out, and our audience is telling us we're still not seeing it yet. And then if we look at vendor content, what's here, you know, the #1 performing piece of content on virtualization actually came out by Dell, and it was talking about VMware. Dell going out and going, yes, let's talk about VMware's new features, purely as a way to get you to think about, you know, running your workloads and your new virtualization on Dell hardware, but it worked brilliantly in our audience going there. VMware has done quite well. I hear recently that VMware also did away with Zimbra as a product, which is interesting. Our audience actually loves Zimbra, which is interesting. So we're going to see how that goes going forward. That was a top performing piece of content. And then we see backup. Again, we've seen that there's a big gap there in backup, and that is performing exceptionally well. Desktop virtualization, another area, has in common with server virtualization the word virtualization only. Is an area that we cover extensively. Some of you may have heard of one of our editors. His name is Brian Madden. He tends to be a lightning rod, controversial, influential, difficult to forget. And if you might see him today, he's wearing bright green pants, impossible to miss. He was just outside a minute ago. But that's an area that we do a tremendous amount of writing and audience against. Here's the thing about desktop virtualization. I think it's a cool topic. I've been studying it and you know, with it since about 2006 or so. I was a terminal services guy back in the way back in the day when that product even existed. In North America, desktop virtualization, which is a big deal, doesn't get the priority and the emphasis that it gets outside of North America. So we showed you that big graph at the beginning where we said, hey, you know, what are your top projects and what have you. And desktop virtualization makes the second page of that I didn't show to you. But in North America, when we say, you know, how big is a priority, we see a lot of, well, it's something we'd like to do, but if we don't get it done this year, we'll do it next year. When we ask that question in APAC, they're like, oh no, top priority, I'll be fired if we don't succeed with this project. I don't know why that is, but there is definitely some regional difference when it comes to desktop virtualization as a solution for desktop management. Other things in desktop virtualization, storage, there's about a zillion storage vendors here. I was going to make a joke about this being the biggest storage show, but I didn't, and I'm not going to. But storage is a big factor in these implementations. If somebody's putting in over 200 seats, we are able to watch their behavior on our network or your behavior on the network. I don't want to scare you, but we do track clicks and readership and try to come up with algorithms and models to explain it. And we know that if you're putting in more than 200 seats of desktop virtualization into production, we know that it's a real project the day that somebody from your team goes over to storage and goes, oh dear, how are we going to be able to roll these things out for our 9 a.m. boot storm? And that is the ding, okay, they just got serious because they know that they're going to have a problem with this. So we do that. SSD, solid state disk is a big deal here. Fusion IO is going to make, I don't know, $7 billion off of this. And we're seeing quite a bit of work going on. And we see about 8 to 10% of the market a year in North America adopting desktop virtualization. That has been consistent. It has gotten better, and the projects are going much better now that the product quality that's being shipped, like the products actually work very well now, and there are best practices. And 3 years ago, that was not the case, and you were kind of on your own, and you were hoping for the best, and we saw a lot of projects fail. We don't see that anymore. So we're seeing much more successful deployments of desktop virtualization. And then we're seeing a strong bias in our audience towards fast to deploy. How can I get this up fast without a lot of effort? And this is where we start to see the appliances coming in. We see converged infrastructures coming in. And these folks are, hey, we can do this quicker if we don't roll our own solution. If we can buy an appliance or a package or a reference architecture that's going to work, there is a bias in our audience towards those types of solutions as opposed to a roll your own, if you get that particular analogy. And then content, we're seeing a lot of editorial content. If you haven't read it yet and you care about desktop virtualization, The VDI Delusion is a book by Brian Madden, very popular book. Some of your vendors will give it away to you for free. If not, you certainly can buy it on Amazon. But an excellent piece out there, and I believe he's got a follow-on book also talking about what is best about VDI. And then for vendor content, extending VDI benefits to your physical PCs, VMware, top content. This is a big deal. Again, this idea, can I manage these things the same? I've got some virtualized, some not. Can I pull those together and manage that well? And VMware has nailed that right on the head. And then a little company, I don't know if they're displaying here, but I've always liked what they're doing. N Computing is doing some things here. Nutanix attacking this idea of SAN. And then, of course, Windows 7 and that migration is stuff that is resonating, that people are still looking, and I saw some zombies walking around, the Xpocalypse. I don't know which vendor is doing that, but they've hired some zombies. It has everything to do with that XP migration to Win 7 or Win 8. It's kind of cool, except I don't really like zombies that much. So that's looking at virtualization. Last piece here is cloud computing. Does anyone care about cloud computing? Is this something? Should we just skip this, or? Okay. All right. Well, great. No. All right. We'll go into it. So cloud computing, much bigger animal, much longer term trend, something that we as a media company are investing, we're putting a lot of eggs in cloud computing, should be no surprise. That's out there. But this is an area, we've got over 1 million members worldwide who are active on cloud computing. We run a number of sites. We run a site for cloud providers. These are people who are building cloud computing for other people to buy. We run a cloud application site, which is looking at SaaS and developing applications. We run a cloud security site because it turns out when it comes to cloud computing, some people care about security. I don't know why. Looking at cloud storage, which is a big segment there. And this is something that we are continuing to divide this market and to have coverage that appeals directly to specific initiatives that the audience, that members of the audience are concerned about. All right. So in terms of a market opportunity, here's what we know. Cloud adoption is real. Private cloud is the top interest topic when it comes to research that's going on. And we are seeing it as a stepping stone. And when we talk to organizations and say, listen, we got to get our private cloud together before we can do our hybrid cloud, even though we have SaaS and some public cloud things going on over here, we can't bring these together until our private cloud is there. When it comes to SaaS, we are seeing that delivery model for software is being highly regarded. That is to say that whenever an organization is looking for an application solution, many of them are now starting to say, hey, is there a SaaS capability? Can we buy this via software as a service as opposed to buying packaged software? And we're seeing projects fail. And this is always something we see in an early stage market, but somewhere between 5 and 10% of the cloud projects that stop before they are done. Because they realize, oh, this was harder than we thought. We don't have the goods. We don't have effective chargeback. Some problem that was a showstopper where they said, listen, we're going to dial back on this. We're going to do more virtualization, and we'll revisit this in 2 years when the technology is out there. Big problems and big areas, and I don't know if any of you have encountered these yet, but the application and data integration. This is, how do I match up the stuff that I have inside my firewall with some of the apps that I'm using as software as a service, or even out in a cloud where I don't have necessarily that same connection and connectability. That is a big, big problem that's out there, and it is becoming more and more important. If you're a vendor, if you can talk about how you can help with that integration, with that application integration, it can go well. We've seen some products, one that stands out that's doing a fantastic job of this from a vendor you're not expecting is Dell. And they've got a product called Boomi that's out there, and they're doing a phenomenal job of positioning that for application and data integration. And we expect to see more stuff out there. But we're definitely seeing a trend towards SaaS first. And when it comes to packaged software, at least considering and checking to see if those capabilities are available as software as a service. When we look at, sort of the census of where people are with cloud computing, we ask them, hey, over the next 12 months, what are you going to do with cloud computing? The number one answer is, we're looking at it. I don't have any deployments yet. I'm not doing it. I don't, it's something that we're researching. This is a big issue. We're not going to jump headfirst into this. Being very pragmatic, we're looking at it. The next most popular answer is those that have dipped their toes in the water are expanding. So they're having positive experience. They are expanding their cloud computing, and it is going well. We're seeing, deploying for the first time. What's nice about this is we've asked this for years, since 2010 anyway. Seems like a long time in compute cycles. But we will not deploy cloud computing at all is now a minority opinion. That is to say, there's nobody out there who's going, oh, God, we're never gonna, that's it. Cloud, no. We're client server, that's it, done, we're sticking with it. That is something that's going on. And then we talked about the abandonment and seeing like, wow, you know what, we started and it failed. We see this in smaller organizations who may have gotten a little overzealous or gotten ahead of themselves in their capabilities. Those projects are failing, okay? And then, if we look here about looking at private and public, this just gives you a sense of where different sized organizations are in the space. And the thing to look at here is that large enterprises looking to implement private cloud over the next 12 months. About 1 in 5 large enterprises is saying, yep, we're implementing private cloud over the next 12 months. We are going to track these folks and track all of you to try to understand, well, is that happening? How long does it take to build a private cloud? What are the success rates? And that sort of thing. And then in terms of objections, well, if you're not doing anything with cloud, why not? Number one answer, security, 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 security. It has been security all along. We see some other things here. Mid-sized businesses have some unique issues about complexity that are overall. And then we're still seeing a couple of organizations, a lot of small and a handful of large, saying we're just not virtualized, or we're not virtualized enough yet. So there's impediments, and this is why we go, this is not a 3-year trend. 4 years from now, we're not all going to be like, oh, we're all cloud. Okay, what's the next project? This is going to take this is a generational type of event, not unlike the switch to PC and client server from mainframe and mid-range, something that I, and judging from the amount of people with gray hair in this audience, we all lived through and saw that happen. And it wasn't overnight. You know, I worked for a mainframe software company to the bitter end. And it took a good 10 years for PCs to become the dominant paradigm, and it took another 10 years for us to get good at it. We expect the same type of dynamic when it comes to cloud computing. Vendors associated with public cloud. So we look at public cloud, we look at private cloud, we call these the beauty contests, and we just go, hey, who do you most associate with public cloud computing? Number one answer, especially among small and medium-sized businesses, is Amazon. No surprise here. Number two answer, Microsoft. I'm a little surprised by that, I gotta be honest with you. But Microsoft charting exceptionally well in the public cloud space. Now I will say, you know, there's some noise going on the difference between public and private. We all thought we had the answer straight here, but more and more quote-unquote public off-prem providers are referring to what they do as private cloud. And we are seeing Red Hat do this. We're seeing Microsoft do this. Microsoft, oh, Azure? Yeah, that's your private cloud. Really? It's in your data center. But at any rate, you know, so there's some blurring of the lines that's going on here. Yeah, looking at motivations for private cloud, you know, hey, we want to leverage our existing infrastructure better. There should be a surprise to no one. And then doing cloud with better security being another big reason for wanting to go to private cloud. We can look and see what's interesting also is that small and medium businesses are going, hey, this is our path to DR and business continuity. So we can look at this. We've got remote sites. You know, we're not huge, but we can look at a private cloud as a means of distributing some of the risk of running our workloads and having redundancy and replication sites in a way that was not available to us easily prior to virtualization and cloud. We ask about job security because I'm always interested. Well, how many of you just like private cloud because it means you're going to have a job? In North America, everyone lies. And, oh, no, that's not important at all. When we ask this in Europe, it charts. Job security comes in like number 4. When you ask IT rank and file, they're saying, we like private cloud because it doesn't involve outsourcing in any way, and there's no chance that the CFO is going to look at us and say, the public cloud looks a lot cheaper than you guys downstairs. But we do see the honesty there. Americans are better at pretending that reality doesn't necessarily exist from time to time in surveys. When we look at private cloud infrastructure and which one is most viable for your organization, here's where we see, you know, VMware, vCloud Director being the most viable solution out there, which is good, and it's what we would expect. Microsoft, you know, not going away though. We are certainly seeing organizations, especially small organizations, say, hey, Microsoft is the way to go. We're even seeing Azure appliances go on. We're going to continue to monitor this, especially with the Active Directory federated stuff that Microsoft did, which we're not going to talk about here. When we look at vendors associated with private cloud, this one, I don't know what to say about this. It is what it is. What it's telling us is this is a very vibrant market. There are a lot of alternatives. VMware is doing well. You can decide for yourselves whether they're winning this or not. It looks like a tie to me. But when we look at who, in your mind, are you associating with private cloud, VMware and Microsoft come up as the most common answers across all of the organization sizes. OpenStack comes in at number 3, the open source option that's out there. And then, interestingly enough, Dell. Dell is coming in as the #1 hardware provider associated with private cloud. That is tremendously interesting to me. This, frankly, shows you the power of marketing, because Dell is out there screaming about this and you know, investing heavily in it, and it is starting to show up in our audience that, hey, you know what, Dell is a vendor that we would consider that's out here. And then we see Cisco, which I would expect, and some of the other players that you would expect. Okay. And then I think this is about last. We're looking at what applications are organizations most wanting to put in the cloud? And the number one answer is email. You know, the one thing that we want to do in a cloud, that we want to get out of our data center and out of active management, is email. If we can get that out and leverage somebody else's resources, and they can pay for all that storage and all the I/O that's going in, and I can blame somebody else for when it goes down, because we do have evidence that if you're the email administrator, email is how you always lose your job. When it goes down, there's a resume generating event in the log. And you generate your resume and go find something else because you have a couple of high-profile failures. So there's a lot of drivers there. Web servers, collaboration software, databases, which actually are the #1 virtualized applications. We're seeing a lot of folks wanting to leverage that and that scalability in the cloud to do so. All right, and then lastly, top content gives you a sense of where this market is. Expert strategies for preparing for private cloud. Again, preparing for private cloud. Not doing it yet, I'm preparing. And that is what is resonating quite a bit. And then interestingly enough, on the vendor side, ready or not, here comes the cloud by Oracle. You know, Oracle, the cloud powerhouse that Oracle is. Actually resonating unbelievably well amongst our audience. And here's what's interesting here. When we survey and we talk about who you're considering for cloud in North America, Oracle does not come up. And when I'm saying Oracle, what I really mean is Sun. When we ask this question in Asia, 1 out of 6 organizations, oh, we're looking at Oracle. And I go, really? But we are seeing some real regional differences here, and I thought that was pretty interesting. And then we see Cisco, HP going that way. So it is an interesting space. There's a lot of room here. This tells us this is an early market. There's a lot of froth going on. So in conclusion, the cloud market, it's active. You all are active in it. It is dividing into subcategories of stuff you can actually buy and problems you can actually solve, because it's really hard to just go, let's do cloud. You have to do something underneath that in a specific discipline, and we are seeing those disciplines start to emerge. Pragmatism is important, and that is really differentiating between the pieces, and we're not, and I've talked to Intel about this, because they keep waiting for the apocalypse, and it's not happening yet, which is a reduction in hardware budgets because of cloud. We are not seeing that yet. So one of the big premises here is, hey, we're going to do cloud, and we're going to save a lot of money on infrastructure, and we'll be able to have flexible workloads and cut our spend with our server vendors. And amongst our audience, we are not seeing that. They're doing both. They're saying, hey, we're putting up new workloads and we're implementing cloud, and that together is still driving an increase year over year in what we're spending when it comes to hardware. At some point that may level off, but right now we're seeing no indication of that. And then lastly, and this is me pounding our chests on behalf of TechTarget. TechTarget and our sites, we've got the largest and most engaged virtualization and cloud computing in the world. They don't all say TechTarget, but the audience in aggregate is the biggest out there. You all, if you're not part of it, you should join it. If you're a vendor, you should absolutely make sure that your message is getting shown across our audiences, because the audience matters and it is very influential. And did I mention it was very big? I have like 2 seconds for questions. Does anyone have any questions? Yes, you can go. Any other questions? Okay, I'm going to bring Rebecca back up and have her close out. And thank you so much for your time.
Great, thank you, John. Thank you. Believe it or not, he's done that a few times, right? And on that, I just wanted to finish off by saying, John and myself, we actually spend a lot of time talking to users and also vendors, and we do have lots of conversations like this individually, where we can help, try to really assess either your user need and what you're trying to accomplish, your pain point, and give you some guidance along the way. And specifically on vendors, we spend a lot of time focusing on this space, so giving independent information and how you can be successful. And here's just a snapshot. A lot of the vendors that are here are also great customers of ours. And from a business side, we actually work with them across awareness campaigns, helping to align with a lot of this great third-party content. So when someone's doing that Google search and they're coming into our independent communities, the vendors have an opportunity to kind of tell their side of the story and how they can solve that problem. We do a lot of demand gen. We're actually the first media company to ever guarantee a number of leads that are going to come across content that you might promote. And we're doing everything from content promotion and content marketing all the way down to even helping identify projects and really working with marketing and sales to make sure that we're prioritizing which accounts out there might be involved in the project that's going on that you care about. And really there's a benefit there. All those annoying telemarketing phone calls that you might get on a day-to-day basis from vendors. I actually, believe it or not, got 3 this morning, and I'm certainly not a target IT professional. But by doing that, we're helping vendors make sure they understand who to contact when and not bother you with services that don't matter at the point in time in which they're trying to engage. So a lot of us will be here. We'd love to have some conversations with you after. As I mentioned, we do have a content marketing guide. But lastly, I'm actually really excited to announce something new that we're doing. I mentioned, and John did as well, the Modern Infrastructure. It's actually not a print publication, it's an online publication. And we are bringing a new award to the industry called the Modern Infrastructure Impact Award. And the reason why this is so exciting is because this is really looking at things that are having the biggest transformative effect on our industry. And we're going to be evaluating vendors from categories like cloud management or enterprise cloud application or converged infrastructure. The fact that now you don't have to go out there and buy all this commodity hardware and configure it yourself. You can go and buy pre-engineered systems from some of your hardware partners. So some of the good part of this is that vendors will be submitting, so we'll be announcing that right after the show. And then users, we're actually going to be submitting and running a survey for users, so then users can contribute and weigh in on what products and services they think are most valuable. And then we'll be announcing it in our December issue of the Modern Infrastructure Easy. So thanks for listening, everybody. If you're a user, continue to have a great event, and vendors, thank you for joining, and success to you as well.